Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Look at yourselves. Look at this beautiful Congress of Feminists. That's right. My name's DeVern Gaines, and I'm the director of the Choices Campus Leadership Program of the Feminist Majority Foundation. Woo! So wonderful to see each of you here. We're getting more chairs in the back very soon. Thank you for your patience. We have maybe over 650 people here. Woo! All over the country. From almost every state in the nation. I'm happy I'm here from the West Coast, and I want to give a shout out to some of my people. Cal State LA, are you out there? Woo! In the house. University of New Mexico? University of New Mexico, all the way in the back, my people! Woo! Who else is here? South Dakota State University? South Dakota State University. North Seattle Community College. Woo! Fantastic. UC Denver? Yeah, that's right. Woo! Keeping it real. UT Austin, Texas. Woo! Longhorns. All right, so this is wonderful. All right, we're going to get to everybody. We're going to save that for the regional. You're all like, me! I liked your attitude. It's my pleasure to introduce the first member of our campus team, and we're going to go through everyone. Edwith Theogene from Florida International University is our campus organizer for the South. Whoop! In the South? Anyone from the South here? Woo! That's right. I met Edwith 2 years ago when we were fighting ballot measures in Florida. She was fantastic. I hunted her down. I said, you must apply to work with us. She is exceptional. She helped us defeat Prop 6 in Florida. Woo! Ballot measure. And now I'm going to let Edwith take it away.
Woo! Hi, everybody. My name's Edwith. Anybody out here from the South? Woo! Shout out to all my schools in Tennessee. ETSU, where are you at? University of South Carolina? Oh, you're all so beautiful. I love it. University of Central Florida, UCF? Oh my gosh, you're awesome. I love Florida. I'd also like to introduce another one of our campus organizers, Christy Burchard. She is the campus organizer for the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. Look at you all. Awesome, awesome. Christy.
Hey everyone. What's up, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic? So I reign from the rural lands of northeastern Pennsylvania. And I went to Kutztown University, where are my Kutztown people? I'm really excited to see you all. I'm now a proud Virginia resident, so I'm proud to be, I'm proud to be Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. I love both my regions. I've got a huge group from Keene State. Where are you guys? Yeah. Rutgers, where are you? And Virginia Tech. Yeah. And let's see, who else? ESU. Yeah. SUNY Purchase, you guys have a huge group. I'm excited to meet you all. If I haven't met you yet, catch up with you. Our next organizer is Maddie. She's our Midwest organizer. She's actually from University of Maryland, but here she is.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Maddie Barnett, and I'm the Midwest organizer. It's true, I went to the University of Maryland, but I have absolutely fallen in love with the Midwest, and that's because all of the amazing organizers FMF has in the Midwest. University of Toledo, were you out there? Yes? That was, woo! I know I have Missouri out there, Western Illinois, so anyone from the Midwest? Yeah? Let me hear you. I love you guys. Please come to the regional caucuses. I'm so excited to see you. And I can now introduce Amanda Coolidge, all the way from Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, California. She is the Girls Learn International Chapter Coordinator.
Hi, everyone. I'm with the Girls Learn International, so I'm with the high school students. So a shout out to Oakton High School. Woo! Trinity School from New York City. Woo! Yeah, so that's us. you'll hear more about us. And now, if you look at your Snazzy name tags, they were designed by Carmen Rios, our very own online campus coordinator. Woo!
Hi, everyone. I'm the online community organizer at the FMF, so you are all in my region, so I think you should all give a shout out to yourselves. I'm really excited for all of us to change the world this weekend. I'm actually even more excited to see photos of it, so I need you to tweet, Instagram, post on Facebook, tag your Tumblr post, hashtag NYFLC 2014, and I'm gonna take the first selfie of NYFLC. But I need all of you to stand up and be in this selfie with me. So if you'll just take the... It's a really beautiful photo of my eye. Thank you very much.
All right, we're moving on. We're doing a slight set change. Okay, anybody? Let's move these tables. Anyone? Feminists at work. Feminists can do this. Yes, right. All right, thank you. I like the way we're banded. Okay, so I get to introduce someone exceptionally extraordinary. Is that possible? Yes. Her name is Eleanor Smeal. That's right. I get to work with her every day. This is an extraordinary privilege. Eleanor Smeal was the 3-term president of the National Organization for Women. She is one of the greatest champions for women's rights and civil rights in the United States and the world today. Being in her presence is an inspiration. I mean it. I learn something every day. I get to speak with her. It is such a privilege. I can tell you that she has an infectious sense of humor, and she's also gravely serious and so deeply committed about bringing equality to everyone. It is mind-boggling. Eleanor Smeal is a phenomena, and she is here with us today. It is my absolute joy to introduce Eleanor Smeal, the president of the Feminist Majority Foundation.
You're all terrific, and we're very excited that you're here, and that you're coming from 30 states and over 135 campus groups. So we're very excited about this conference, and we're thinking of moving the wall back there because there are people standing up. We're trying to get more chairs. I don't want to speak real long now because I really would like to introduce some folks that have come, and they have other engagements, but I'm glad they're here today because they represent not only their tremendous leadership, but the support that we have at the highest reaches of our country. When we first started this movement, how we were dealt with, frankly, was a joke. You know, we were the crowd that people like to laugh at. They don't even have these shows anymore on television, but they used to have noon shows where they'd bring us on and they'd say, oh my God, she can walk and talk, and she's still one of those people. But anyway, but basically everything has changed. And it's changed because the feminist movement, which started as a minority movement in numbers, I'm talking, never in spirit, never in ideas, in the 60s, is now a majority movement in numbers. Let us not forget, never forget, we didn't name this organization on a whim. We named it because in 1980s, we topped the women, most women self-identified as feminists. Now, they are categorizing, if you're a strong feminist, They ask anybody else if they're strong in doing it because our numbers are so big. We're something like over 70% of the Democratic women self-identify as feminists. If you look on the independent women, we're over a majority. And of Republican women, we're almost a majority. The last poll I saw was 49%, and we're creeping up there. We'll be a majority of the entire female population. And what I'm so excited about now in Congress, there was just a handful of women, but as you know, we're now approaching, we're at 18.5% when you throw in the 20% from the Senate. But we know that that's got to be much bigger, right? We're going to be, but the inspirational thing is the women in the House and the Senate are by and large strong feminist category. And I'm going to switch the agenda a little bit and then come right back to it, because I wanted to introduce Congresswoman Edwards, because I know she has other events today, and I didn't want her to wait, and then we'll come back to some others, but to the rest of us. But Donna Edwards started with social change, social justice movements. In fact, she was the founder of the co-founder and first executive director of the National Network to End Domestic Violence. In fact, where we met her was not only when she was the executive director, but she was leading the fight to change the laws of our country on this very issue. And one of the exciting things that she did was she led the fight to ban handguns from domestic violence violators, abusers. And in fact, Jennifer Jackman, who is from now a professor from Salem, they're gonna greet each other. The two of them led the fight, and Jennifer was then our director of research, and as I said, Donna Edwards was the executive director of the network, and with Senator Lautenberg, they not only led the fight, they passed the law. And it all comes back because, can you believe this? This very week, or was it 10 days? It was within a few days. The Supreme Court just ruled 9-0 in favor of the law. Now that's something. I didn't know we ever got 9-0 decisions. But that is, and when we first started that, or when Donna first started that, they thought we were a little nuts. I mean, you're going to ban handguns? I mean, and in fact, we did have a lobby against us that changed their mind. In fact, they're now with us, but the police initially lobbied against us, and they no longer do. In fact, everybody sees the wisdom of this particular statute. Anyway, Donna's done much more than that. She's gone on. She went on to be the executive director of the ARCA Foundation. And today, that's what I'm so excited about. She's not only defeated in 2008 a 15-year incumbent, but today, she is in the leadership of the Democratic Party in the United States Congress. And I never thought this could happen, and I can remember we still do. We have all these recruiting programs to encourage people to run and everything. She's now in charge of recruitment and for the House Dems. So that is a full circle. And every inch of the way, she has been a champion for social justice on a multitude of issues. And so it gives me a great honor to introduce Congresswoman, how could I have done that? Anyway, Congresswoman Donna Edwards from the 4th District of Maryland.
my God, I feel like I'm at home. Oh, thank you so much, Ellie. I have to tell you, when I walked in the room and I just see all of my good friends and people, I mean, we've been in these fights for so long, and then to see Jennifer Jackman, I haven't seen you in such a long time. I cannot tell you, the two of us together, you know, walking around the halls of Congress, fighting off in the courts, when they said that we couldn't ban handguns from people who had already demonstrated that they were violent toward women, and then we were still giving them guns too, we said, forget that, we're not going to do it. And so, and Jennifer, I still have my no guns for wife beaters button. That's right. Oh, wow, it is so great to be here with you. And I think to all of the campus organizers who were up here earlier, I'm going to apologize to you at the outset because I spilled coffee all over your name tags. But it's not because I don't love you. Ellie, I love what is happening all across this country on college campuses, in our communities and our community colleges, with our feminists who are really leading the way. It's almost like, you know, over the time, I remember, Ellie, when you all said you were going to create this like campus-based network, and people said, oh, yeah, that's not going to work, you know. Young people aren't really interested in this stuff, and they're not activists anymore. And you said, forget that, too. And what we have here today, I mean, 650 plus feminists gathered in a room, in one room, but gathered all across this country. And so congratulations to you. It's great to see. And to Maddie, you're from the University of Maryland? And Anne Arundel County, shout out to that. I represent Prince George's and Anne Arundel County in the Congress, and we didn't think we had too many friends in Anne Arundel County because I'm a little bit of a liberal, but I'm glad to know that is true. It is, I mean, it's just so special to be here with you because the task that we have at hand is really a tremendous fight, and you know that. There are so many of us, I know when I was on my college campus at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, it was when we, all right. Oh, there's some Wake Forest people back there. But when I was on my college campus at Wake Forest University down in North Carolina, I thought then that we were fighting the last fights for women's rights, for women's reproductive health, for equality. And it turned out that the fight was only just getting started. And so here we are, a couple of decades later, I won't say how many, several, a couple of decades later, really revisiting so many of those fights. And even when you think about the domestic violence offender gun ban, I mean, that passed in 1996, and we're revisiting it in the courts today. And so I think it's a reminder to us that just because we pass a law, just because we implement a law, does not mean that the fight is over. We know that when it comes to violence against women. Kim Gandy, who I'm happy to say is now my successor at the National Network to End Domestic Violence, knows that. Ellie, you know that. We know that when it comes to the fight for women's reproductive freedom. In the current Congress, I'm the chair of the Democratic Women's Working Group, and we love that because it is all of the Democratic women gathered together really fighting these fights in the halls of Congress. And so when it came to you know, some of our colleagues out there trying to defund family planning and Planned Parenthood, we said we were going to stop that, and we stopped that. When they said, you know what, we're not going to be able to ram a health care bill through without protecting women's reproductive health, we said, are you kidding? You mean we're going to pass a health care law in this country, a reform law, and not include women's health care? None of that. And there could have been no better champion than our leader, our speaker at the time, Nancy Pelosi, who said we are not going to leave women out. And so here we are now, and we have launched, along with Ellie and so many of the organizations who are represented in this room, a women's economic agenda, because we know that it's about our health care and our bodies and our freedom, but we also know it's about our economic health. When it comes, I don't have to tell you, the day that you graduate college, you will start day one not being paid as much as the guy who, slept on Saturdays through Saturday morning class is being paid when you go to work. Starting on day one when you graduate from college, the likelihood is that that is actually going to be the point in your entire career, if we leave things the way they are, that you will come the closest to meeting that wage gap, that you will come the closest in income to your male colleagues. And as you get more experience, as you go to school more, as you develop in your job, that gap actually widens. 77 cents on the dollar for women. For African American women, 64 cents on the dollar. For Latinas, 58 cents on the dollar. In what sane world, in what developed world should it be possible for more than half of our nation's workers to have to work for less from day one? I mean, it is really ridiculous. And so we have launched a women's economic agenda that is about not just fair pay, which is important, but equal pay for equal work. Your generation, you all are going to help us achieve that. Now, some of you may not be thinking about it right now, and some of you may have, but if you have children, decide to have children, number one, it should not take away from your ability to continue to move through the workforce. But if you do decide to have children, and it is your decision whether or not and when you're going to have children and how many you're going to have. But if that day comes and you have to get child care, do you know that in this country, child care for an infant costs more than it costs to go to college? Hear me out on this. In Maryland, in my home state, if you have an infant, it costs $12,936 to have an infant in child care. It's about $10,000 a year at most of our public institutions to go to college. That means that for most families, they're spending about 35% of their income on child care. Not on a mortgage, not even on student loans. They're spending it on child care. And in most of the developed world, guess what we do? We take care of our children, but not in the United States. And so for so many women, women who live on their own, even women who are in families with their partners, actually have to pay more in child care. So we have to do something about that. And it's not even quality child care, not even quality, where children are learning in a learning environment. That is part of our economic agenda because it constrains women's economic success and economic lives. In fact, it constrains families. When I was raising my son, who's now 25, when I was raising my son, and he was very young and I was on my own, he got sick in a daycare arrangement that I knew from the moment I put him in there wasn't the safest daycare arrangement. I did it because I had to. I left him there because I had to go to work, because I had to put food on the table. And he ended up getting meningitis, and he almost died. That happens to children every single day in this country, and the guilt that parents have, the guilt that women have about that is unacceptable. And so we need quality, affordable child care. Another part of our economic agenda is paid leave. Do you know in this country most people can't even take one day off from work so that they can be sick at home instead of over our food? That they can't take one day off from work to take care of a sick child, not one day off of work to take care of a sick parent or a sick partner? Unacceptable in the developed world. Your generation will do something about that. Now let's talk about wages, because we talked about equal pay. But in this country, most of the people who work for minimum wage are women. $7.25 an hour. Now, I'm not really that great at math, but If you take $7.25 an hour and you multiply that by 40 hours a week, you would have to work about 2.5 jobs in order to make it above the poverty line. Okay, and so then those same screwballs who argue that we don't want to pay for school nutrition and for food stamps, we don't want to pay for low-income heating assistance, we don't want to pay for housing assistance, but we think it's okay for all of the rest of us to subsidize Walmart and everybody else while they pay low-wage workers. Are you kidding me? Now, don't get me started, because not only are 2/3 of the workers who work for minimum wage women, but also 2/3 of the workers who work for tipped wages are women. And if you're working for a tipped wage in this country, mostly you're making $2.13 an hour, and you haven't had a raise in 23 years. 23 years. Yes, how many of you are younger than 23? Well, the tip wage hasn't been raised in your entire lifetime. God, I can't even believe I'm saying that. And so we're fighting to raise the tip minimum wage to 70% of the regular minimum wage at $10.10 an hour, which I'm not even going to argue with you is great, but it's better than what we have now. And to index that to inflation so that you're not being paid 1968 wages. So, how many of you are from Maryland? Any Maryland? Okay. I got homework for you. I don't care where you're from in Maryland, but you need to call your state senators, because right now they're considering a minimum wage bill that stinks. I mean, I wanted to say it in more refined language. But in Maryland, they're considering a minimum wage hike, maybe to $10.10 an hour, but they stripped out the tipped wages because they fell under prey to the restaurant lobby that's making money hand over fist and stripped out tipped wages from their minimum wage bill. And they're going to want to call that a progressive bill. Don't you let them. Call your senator. And, you know, if y'all aren't from Maryland, call the senators anyway. So, now, I know that you have a lot of work to do, and I know that you can make a lot of choices about what you want to do between now and Thanksgiving. And I also know that this is the Feminist Majority Foundation, but you cannot control what some goofy speaker comes to your stage and says, right? You can't control, you can cut off the mic. People have been known to do that. But all I want to share with you is that between now and November, there are things that you can do in your free time to make sure that there are policymakers in Washington and in our state legislatures that reflect what you want, that reflect your ideals as a feminist, that reflect your ideals as a humanist, that reflect your ideals as people who are willing to fight for and win social justice. And I'm not going to tell you how to do it or who you need to do it for, but not a single one of you should leave your campus or your community without doing it for someone. And make it selfish. Make it about you. Make it about you, because you want higher wages, you want equal pay, you want to be able to control your body and your reproductive freedom. Make it about you. And so Ellie is sitting over here saying, oh my gosh, I don't want her to endanger our tax status, and I won't. But I will just close by saying this to you, that what you do matters. What you say matters. And they all of these folks all across the country, I always like to say, why do we need to pay any attention to what young people think? Because they don't vote, because they won't register, but we need to pay attention to what you think. You need to make your voices heard, and I am counting on you in every single state across this country. I don't care whether it's in South Dakota or any of those other rectangular states. I don't really care where it is. I want it to be in Maryland and in South Dakota and in Ohio and in every single state of this country. Make your voices heard, because when you are heard, it will be a game changer. It will be a deal maker. Make your voices heard all across this summer into November, and then we'll let Ellie worry about the tax status. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, that was terrific, and I think we're fine. We're fine. You can. Voting is the United States right? And we still have a democracy, so everybody has to make their voice here. And I'm going to be joined now on the stage by the rest of. We're doing this opening assembly in stages because it's a little long. And while Donna was speaking, Congresswoman Edwards was speaking, she remained her cool as they opened the doors and put up a lot more chairs. So now you see that the whole gallery has gotten bigger. And so that was really great. And I really thank the hotel that so accommodated so quickly to the demand for more chairs and more people entering, which is a great problem to have. We started this whole program, and I wanted to make sure that both Shireen was here and Latifah were up here. And actually, the next wave will be all the violence, the speakers on violence against women. But we're going to start with this opening, more of a one for all and all for one ceremony. And the reason why we titled that way is that I think a lot of people still believe the myth that somehow women's groups do not get along. You know, that's the whole thing they keep on throwing at us. Nothing could be further from the truth. Feminist groups, and I would say the vast, vast majority of women's groups in the United States self-identify as feminist groups. We work together on a whole host of issues, really a large number of issues. We've been talking about violence and economic issues and reproductive health issues and health issues itself, a lot of global issues. We're trying to still pass the CEDAW, which is the Convention to Eliminate All Forms of Sex Discrimination. We work on social justice issues, civil rights issues, gay, lesbian, transgender issues. We work on, I keep on saying it because it's true, that there are education issues, you name it. There are large numbers of women's groups that are involved. And it's not a coincidence that we communicate with each other. We are involved with each other. We know who has what positions. And even though a lot of women's groups are what I would call single issue, they specialize in domestic violence, or they specialize in education or health care or sexuality issues or academic issues. You can go on, or economic. The key is that most of them will take positions on a broad range of issues. Although they don't have maybe the money or the staff to do it all, they coordinate a great deal. And one of the things that makes this all easier is that we have at the national level an organization called the National Council of Women's Organizations. Right now we have over 200 organizations and many very large women's organizations in it, such as the YWCA or the American Association of University Women. I could go on, huge numbers. We coordinate and we meet at a national level. And our next speaker is the new chair of the National Council of Women's Organizations, Shireen Mitchell, who was the vice chair. She's been very involved with coalition building so that we build our voices to make them together, we're stronger. And she also is an entrepreneur. She founded and is the executive director or president of Digital Sisters. So I should say Digital Sisters. But anyway, and she put on, and this was not that long ago. It seems like ancient history because the social media is moving so rapidly. She brought together and helped a lot of groups get up to speed on Feminism 2.0. And we are reaching now, through digital, millions of women every day worldwide. When you take the collective, in fact, we used to talk so much about mainstream media. Our media is big as some of the mainstream media. And it is very exciting that we can get a message out to millions of people. And I just love these analytics where you can see the lights flashing on from India and from, you name the country, they're there. And they're working with us, and we're working with them. So I want to introduce Shireen Mitchell, who saw that vision earlier than most of us and who works on it daily and is now the chair of the National Council of Women's Organization. Shireen.
Thank you, Ellie. Honestly, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be in this room. I come from a different background, and that's why I'm here to speak, because the challenge is that we all assume that our backgrounds, our ethnicities, our gender makes us so different from one another that we cannot get along. And I'm here to say that that's wrong. That ultimately, at the end of the day, all of our issues, every place that we come from has everything to do with the people we are today. I would not be standing here right now if I didn't honor where I came from. I grew up in New York City. I also grew up in the projects in New York City. I used to be embarrassed about that. And the reason that I used to be embarrassed about that is because people would tell me, because I grew up in the projects, that meant that I could not be anything more than maybe the local, I used to pack bags, so I would be the local cashier at the local supermarket. And that was my upbringing. That was what I was supposed to have aspirations to. But what really happened was I went to school every day like everyone else, and I had interests. I also had a mother that catered to my interests. My interests actually started with something very interesting that we talk about every day, a video game. Now, let's just be clear, my video game was in the arcade room. It was not in my room, right? But every day I went there, and every day, guess what happened? I was the only girl. People told me I was the only girl. I should not be interested in video games. What was I doing there? And shouldn't I go back across the projects and play in the yard out front, which was the monkey bars, whatever that was. By 6th grade, I tested above high school reading and math level. My principal, thank you. My principal was not happy with that, actually, because I was a project kid that was not supposed to be smart. That my social economic status meant that I wasn't supposed to be smart enough to test that high. But my test scores proven differently. So as I grew up, I was always told that for some reason that there was something different about me, that I should just sort of keep myself down and not aspire to be anything more than that. Well, fast forward, of course, that does not work for me. I actually started the first women of color web firm in Washington, D.C. area. So I was a pioneer. I came around before there was e-commerce, before there was AOL, before there was eBay. I was building things with, yes, a whole bunch of guys who thought I was crazy and would call me that crazy girl. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? At the end of the day, from there, I realized such a disparity, even for me, the amount of times people told me because of my social economic status, because of my gender, because of where I came from, that somehow I was less than. I pretty much said, screw you, I'm not. So after that, I looked out and decided to help other girls who were in my situation. I founded Digital Sisters. I focused on issues that were keeping young girls down, particularly young girls of color in the tech space. We now have organizations like Black Girls Code and others that are really moving that agenda. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I realized that my job was still to fight back and say, no matter where you come from, you have something that you can contribute. And at the end of the day, for me, I needed to focus on issues that were pertaining to women and girls in tech and media. And now, with social media, that's why I did Feminism 2.0, helping women's organizations come into the forefront. We were a little bit behind because we didn't know about, whether or not we should be doing that. And also, I was already seeing the writing on the wall because I was involved. And watching the movement to where we are today, to our voices, the way we've leveraged it digitally, the way that we're connecting internationally, we have changed the landscape, and online and digital has made that happen. And I fought every day to get us all connected to make that happen. So now, as chair of the National Council of Women Organizations, that's also what I do. I bring us all together. We still have these large organizations, we still have small organizations, but we come together every day. We may be single issue, we may focus on technology like I do in media, but at the end of the day, when I'm focused on that, what happens is women who are in tech industries finally realize that they're being discriminated against, that I get to fight for them. Just the other day, a young girl working for GitHub finally realized and apologized to all the feminists for not believing that this harassment and sexism happens in the workplace, and we need to do something about it. It happens for all of us, so it doesn't matter where we are, what field we choose, where our issues are, that we are all working together. We need every one of these issues, and we need every one of you to make that happen. We bring all of that diversity together, and we change the world. Ultimately, that's what we're here to do. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I am doing a session at 2:15 about social media and digital, so definitely come and speak to me. I've been around a long time too, so I didn't want to talk about the video games that I actually played, but I'll just say, it is Pac-Man, right? And so if you want to learn about that, and what people don't know about Pac-Man, this is a really interesting commentary. Pac-Man was actually designed for girls. It was the only original game designed for girls. Some crazy idea about desserts and girls liking food is how Pac-Man came about. However, when Pac-Man came about, it changed the video game industry in a way that you will never understand. And only those of us who've been around for a while remember that that was the origination. Now the games are sort of geared toward guys, and we need to change that too.
Thank you, Shireen. And if you look in the book, the big book, the program book, you'll see where the workshops are. And I hope that everybody goes to all of them. We have tremendous speakers at them. And you'll notice another thing. They come from a lot of organizations. This wouldn't be possible without our sponsors, which I know are going to go up on the screen, and without all of the groups participating. So we're working in coalition, and we want to make sure and thank everybody who's been speaking at our workshops. Now, our next speaker is a person who also comes from the women's movement, in my opinion. I'm sure she does came from a lot of other things, but she was an officer of the National Organization for Women. And I'm very, very proud to say that Latifah Lyles last week became the director of the Women's Bureau of the Department of Labor. Latifah started in the women's movement as a very young woman at the age that you are currently, and she is brilliant on many, many areas, especially administration, getting things done, which is so important. No matter what you do, you have to get the thing done. She has a passion for women's issues and a passion for changing the economic reality of women and working families. She is really a can-do but very positive, upbeat person. You know, there are these type of people that smile a lot. And when someone said I had a sense of humor, it was DeVerne in the introduction. I said, who is she introducing? Anyway, I'm not one that always smiles. I'll have to be honest. I work at it. I work at it. But Latifah doesn't work at it. She is always upbeat. I can't quite understand it. But anyway, and she gets things done. And I think it's just marvelous that she's become the head of the Women's Bureau. And by the way, we got to understand, we had to fight to keep the Women's Bureau. We had to fight first to start the Women's Bureau. Then we had to fight to keep the Women's Bureau. Just in the last administration, not this current administration, but not so long ago, there was an effort to eliminate the Women's Bureau from the Department of Labor. And all of the women's groups, led by Heidi Hartman and the Institute for Women's Policy Research, got together and we fought to keep the Women's Bureau. Because if you suppress the numbers and the statistics about who is employed, at what level they're employed, what they're being paid, guess what? You can say anything you want. You can say, oh, those women, they don't know anything. They're paid just as much as men. Who would know? Who would know what the level of discrimination is? Who would know how we're doing if you don't have a measure? And it is imperative that we have a measure that studies the wage gap, that studies promotions and hiring, that understands that women in labor unions are getting paid more, et cetera. The Bureau of Labor Department statistics does that, but believe me, without the Women's Bureau, involved not only at the national level, but in regions all over our country, we would not have the information, we would not have the knowledge of what is happening to women in the economy. And let's not forget one major statistic. Today, women are the majority of workers in this country for pay. Now, if you put in all the housework we're doing, we're really crazy. I mean, we are the worker bees. And when we started, we were 35% of the workforce. Today, we have topped, and we are the majority. So we have a right to know how we're doing. And we are determined to eliminate not only the wage gap, but the benefits gap. And I know having Latifah there fighting for us every day is very, very important. Today, she's coming not only for the Labor Department, but for the White House. And she's going to talk about the White House Summit on Working Families, which is very important, and it's coming up, and how it's going to affect students. Latifah Lyles.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for the little history. So the Women's Bureau is a 90-year-old organization that was established just a couple of months before women got the right to vote. And when I got there, I was very curious. I'd heard about the Bureau from people like Kim and Ellie, and talked about its important significance over the years in providing us with the critical facts that we need to get our job done. And I'm going to be honest. When I got to the Women's Bureau about 5 or 6 years ago, we had no information on the pay gap. We had no data and statistics on wages for women online. Our staff was told essentially that we could talk about women's wages, but not necessarily in comparison to men. And so I unearthed volumes of unpublished reports. We lost our labor economists and people who really were doing the job that has really kept us informed for so many years. And when I arrived, the staff would gradually bring out reports and say, you may want to see this. Maybe this is something we can publish. And so my job has been the past few years is to unearth the data, to get the Bureau back to where it needs to be, and to talk about why, as Ellie says, the data is so critical. This is the first time in my experience in this movement when, whether it's in political campaigns or talking to folks on the Hill, that people talk about the wage gap. Men, women, all elected officials talk about the 77 cents on the dollar. That's not something that is, we have to defend. It's a reality. Right now, essentially, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Census Department provide most of the information that we have that talk about how we're doing men, women, in the labor force, people of color. I do want to say that one of our first new fact sheets that we just published a couple of weeks ago is about the economic status of women of color. And it talks about women in unemployment. It talks about the wage gap. It talks about retirement security, educational attainment, and unemployment, and a variety of other issues. And so what our goal is going to be leading up to the White House Summit is to gradually roll out more of the information that we think is so critical to help us move some of these policies forward. So thank you for pointing that out. Now, we do have a lot of data and statistics, but I decided not to talk about a lot of those today because I want to talk about the summit. But a couple of things I just want to point out, just so we have a framework here, is that in the President's State of the Union, he said, "When women succeed, America succeeds," urging action on key issues that would benefit women, their families, and workers, and increasing the minimum wage, dealing with equal pay. I'm so glad the Congresswoman talked about paid and family leave, early childhood education and childcare, and increasing women's access and advancement into higher paying occupations, and not forgetting that still women make up the majority of minimum wage and service jobs. And to help us determine innovative ways, because we know while there are a variety of policy proposals out there, there's only so much we can do in the next coming year or two, is that we are going to galvanize across the country and culminating in Washington, D.C. in June, a White House Summit on working families. We're going to be bringing together workers, students, economists, business leaders, legislators, and advocates to talk about what concrete solutions we need to hold up in the future that can really address the needs of workers. And when I was looking around the room, I have to do a little exercise here. I was trying to count how many men were in the audience, and I lost count. So could all the men kind of make some noise in the audience here? I'm so excited. I'm so excited that there are so many young men in this audience, because this is about working families. This is about working people. This is about my going to, the playground with my daughter and seeing fathers with their daughters who care and who themselves are supporting their wives who are working all day. I think this idea that feminists, Ellie talked about some really incredible statistics about where we are as feminists, but I would argue that I think probably in our generation, or my generation, there are probably more men who are feminists than ever before, and we need to start looking at those numbers too, because frankly, we are not trying to change a conversation. We're trying to uplift a conversation that we know has been going on for decades, and that's about how we move some of these issues forward. So together with men and women. So and I have to say that Ellie is one of the people that, in various times and places has advocated very heartily for the fact that this is a movement for all of us, and in particular men, and she talks about the men in her family and being part of this moving forward. And honestly, we're not going to do it by ourselves. We're going to do it together. The White House Summit essentially is going to be, we're going to have about 1,500 or so people in Washington, D.C. It's going to be a combination of bringing in the women's economic agenda that the Congresswoman talked about, some of these policies and proposals that get to raising women's economic status, getting them into better jobs, and dealing with discrimination in the workforce, but then also talking about issues like leadership, making sure that we can figure out really how it is that while women make up more of the graduates than ever before in education at all levels, we are still under 5% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and a very, very small percentage of women who are in technology jobs of the future, as it's put, advanced manufacturing, and others. I want to give you a few statistics about the issue related to leave and caregiving, because I think it's so important. I know a lot of you hear about the pipeline, right? How do we get more women into the pipeline? The pipeline, it's all about feeding the pipeline. Well, the pipeline leaks, okay? It's very leaky. Once you get in the pipeline, and as part of what I look at in my job is making sure that that pipeline works, so that once you go through your life and the things that we expect to happen, like taking care of families, taking care of our parents, taking care of our children, trying to advance in our occupations and retire with dignity, is not something that you have to choose between. You can be ambitious, you can be very, very assertive, you can actually make it and also be able to support a family and a life. And part of what is not really understood, I mean, I have to say honestly, when I had my child, people often assumed that I had maternity leave, and I don't. Federal employees are just as other employees are afforded 12 weeks under FMLA, which they can use for pregnancy, but very few people in this country, and this is compared to other industrialized nations, the United States is really, really, really doing poorly. And of course, the Congresswoman talked about how bad we're doing on the leave issue. We have no maternity care in this country. We also don't have a guaranteed sick days in this country. Numerous studies show that implementation of family-friendly policies, including access to leave, enhances businesses' profitability. So the people who say that we can't afford minimum wage, we can't afford health care, we can't afford maternity care, they are not going on data. It is just not true. We are really the only industrialized nation that doesn't offer some of these really critical advances that other countries are saying, well, you know what, if more than 50% of women are working in this country, then we better figure it out. We know that it's not just women's participation in their success, but when our children are in affordable childcare and pre-K systems that actually work and are safe and are, you know, the workers are paid to take care of your children, the outcomes for families and the outcomes for that individual child makes a difference, which of course ultimately benefits how our communities do across the board. And also, I just want to say that around the minimum wage issue, we have estimated, the Council of Economic Advisors of the White House, that raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour and indexing it to inflation could in fact close by 5% the gender wage gap. This is real money in the pockets of working families. And while some of these policies we talk about where it relates to flexibility and leave and all of these things seem like niceties, but they really do go a long way in the ability for people to keep their jobs, especially workers who are servers, workers who are in healthcare who have to change jobs or risk losing their jobs if they have to take any extended time off. A few more things about minimum wage before I wrap up. I just want to say that it is not the case that all of these issues exist in silos. All of these issues roll up together, including women's access to health care and affordable health care. All of this makes us successful as a nation. About 1/4 of all workers who would benefit from the increasing the minimum wage have dependent children, and 31% of female workers would benefit who have children. 2.8 million working single mothers would benefit from the proposed increase in the minimum wage, and more than 80% of whom are women. Research shows that raising the minimum wage would reduce children's poverty among female-headed households, and increasing the minimum wage can also help women work their way out of poverty and into the middle class. So we understand that these proposals are tested. There's states all across the country who are doing better than we are here federally in moving some of these issues forward, and that's why it's so exciting to be here, to hear that so many of you are from all over the country, because leading up to the Working Family Summit in Washington, which is going to be on June 23rd, the Department of Labor Women's Bureau is hosting regional forums all across the country, including in San Francisco with Leader Pelosi. We're doing something in Boston with Senator Warren. We have about 6 to 7 of those. I have more of that information. We would love to plug you in and get you on to into the conversation and figure out how we can feed all of that into what happens here in Washington in June. We essentially are going to look at those state policies that are working, including minimum wage, paid leave, sick days, childcare, and others, where people are ahead of the game to really say this can work and this is how we do it when we get here in Washington, D.C. So hopefully you can join us. And if you can't join us, we're going to have some really cool Story Bank and other social media opportunities so that you can join the conversation and tell the stories about you and your families as well. So I look forward to seeing some of you maybe in the future, in the next few months. And thanks again, Ellie, for having me. And it looks like you guys are going to have a great program, so have fun.
Thank you, Latifah. And when she says there's no paid family medical leave, that's what we're saying, no paid maternity leave. Just remember there's no leave because the average person cannot take it. It's only if you have the money that you could take it. Now, one of the things that I want to show how family-friendly we are is I'm again changing the schedule. That's why I left the stage, because one of our speakers has a new baby. Well, it's not that new, but she was here last time. But anyway, has a babysitting problem, and I wanted to change so she could come on, and she's so wonderful to come. And I do think that she is the expert, really, on a subject that is very important for so many people in this room, and certainly millions of women throughout the nation, I say throughout the world, is the availability of birth control and contraception. And Claire Coleman was a leader in Planned Parenthood. She ran a clinic in the New York area, and then she came here. And why I say she's a natural a resource for the entire women's movement is she now leads an organization called NIFRA. She's the executive director of the National Family and Reproductive Health Associates. Anyway, NIFRA. And what it means is she knows all about the availability of family planning, birth control, and to the average woman, and knows that the current attack on abortion is not only an attack on abortion, but is an attack on the availability of contraceptives. Can you believe this is happening in 2014 in the United States? And so she is going to get us all up to date. I hope she gets us mad, because it is these attacks on women are not going to stop until young people, men and women, decide it's going to stop. And especially women, because it is your lives they're trying to control, and you know that. So, Claire Coleman, I'm so happy you came.
I want to thank all of my colleagues for accommodating me. I am a solo mother to a 19-month-old, and childcare is always a struggle, Lateefah. So thank you for talking about how the Department of Labor is focusing on data and women. I think it's so important to have the opportunity to follow Lateefah, because so much of women's economic opportunity, but also family security, is based on the idea that we can plan when and whether to have children. So I am here today to tell you that your energy and attention, your effort and your anger, your heart and your soul should be in the fight to protect publicly funded family planning, and particularly the federal Title X program. Title X is going to be 44 this year, as am I, and it's the only dedicated source of family planning funding in the country. There are lots of different ways that contraception and sexual health care get paid for, but this is the only source of funds that underwrites an entire network of care around the country. So it's based on a sliding fee scale, and we never, ever turn a patient away because they are unable to pay. And Title X pays for a lot of things, but never 100% of anything. And here's the last thing you need to know about how it's structured. Congress decides every year how much money we get. So that means that in the last 25 years, we've never met more than a third of the need for publicly funded contraception. So today in this country, Guttmacher tells us that more than 19 million women alone need public subsidy in order to access contraception and sexual health. In the Title X system in 2012, we saw 4.8 million of them. We are nowhere near giving people access to the tools, information, education, and effective methods of contraception that allow them to decide what kind of careers they might be able to achieve, what kind of educational attainments are in front of them, the kind of lives they're going to be able to give their children. And Lateefah talked about the importance of the minimum wage, and I could not agree more, but let me just say this. If you are a single mother with 3 children and they raise that minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, you are still under the poverty line in this country. You are still making less than the federal government presumes is the 100% federal poverty line. It's about $24,000 a year. So even if we do this thing that Republicans say are impossible, there are millions of people who are working full-time who are not above the poverty line in this country. So that's why our systems are so important. And we work in lots of places around the country. We're in every state, we're in the territories, we're in the sovereign nations and the federated states. I want to tell you about some of our systems, because Ellie says you don't know. So we're at Action for Boston Community Development, Boston. We're at the Family Planning Association of Puerto Rico. We're at Adagio Health in Pittsburgh, Unity Healthcare in DC, Community Health Centers in Winter Garden, Florida, Aunt Martha's Youth Development Center in Chicago, the St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health System in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Benvenutos in Los Angeles. So now you're going to say, wait a minute, what about Planned Parenthood? And I want to tell you that hundreds and hundreds of Planned Parenthoods are engaged in this program all across the country, in states like Virginia, in North Carolina, in Tennessee, in Ohio, in Oklahoma, Utah, Oregon, and Alaska, and in many, many other places in the country. Planned Parenthood is part of Title X. But I don't want you to walk out of this room thinking Planned Parenthood equals family planning the way Kleenex equals tissue. This is an incredibly diverse network. In fact, there's more than 1,100 service sites nationwide, and a lot of them are located in county and city health departments. As I said, we saw just about 4.8 million people in the last year we have data. 92% of them are women, but the number of men we've seen in the systems have grown 4 times in the last decade. Just over half of our patients are in their 20s. Most patients are between the ages of 20 and 24 or 25 to 29. So a lot of folks think of Title X funded networks as places for teenagers. And a big chunk of people we see in those systems are in fact under the age of 19, just about 20%. But the vast majority are adults, and the vast majority of them are working, and many of them are parents. And I also want you to know that the single fastest rising population in a Title X health center today are women over the age of 40. Because they're losing hours, they're losing jobs, they're losing insurance, and they're coming into the safety net. More than 70% of the folks who come through our door are considered by the federal government to be in poverty. Again, that's about $24,000 a year for a family of 4. $24,000 a year for a family of 4. 65% roughly are uninsured entirely. And if you've got that low income, if you've got an income for a family of 4 under $24,000 a year, your services at Title X are completely free. And as income rises, our sliding fee scale kicks in. This network has been completely rocked in the last 3 or 4 years. Congress, as I said, sets our funding every single year. They've cut us nearly 50% in 3 years. Let me tell you directly what that means. 460,000 people have disappeared from the system. 326 health centers are closed across this country. A lot of you have heard about the state of Texas and the devastation there. I need you to know it's bigger. Texas is big. It's bigger than Texas. Nearly 500,000 people have disappeared from the system because Congress and state legislatures have politically targeted this program. And there is no way on God's earth they are going anywhere else for care. They are just falling out of the system entirely. So that's why we need your help. We need your intention, your energy, and engagement. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to find out where in your community Title X funded services are being offered, because it may not be in the most obvious place. It may be in your county or city health department or at your local Planned Parenthood affiliate, but it also may be at a community action network or a youth development center or a university or hospital health clinic. Be a voice for this network. Oh, and if you happen to have a source of insurance, whether it's your own or your family's, and you can use it, I urge you to bring your insurance to a Title X funded center, because your insurance reimbursement payment to that center will help underwrite care for people who have nothing. That is how we do it. We put it together. We don't just take Title X money and make it run. Title X doesn't pay for 100% of anything. If all we had was Title X, our systems would lose money year after year after year, and that is one key reason why more than 325 centers have closed in the last 3 years alone. So when and if you have insurance, I beg you to consider supporting the kind of community resources that have been there for you, your neighbors, and generations of others. We need to let community leaders and elected officials know that we care about access in our local community to these services, that we can't travel for them, and we need Title X because it protects confidentiality throughout a patient's lifetime. Confidentiality is not about being an adolescent. Confidentiality is about where you are in your life and in your relationship. Sometimes you're going to need confidentiality in some relationships and not in others. Sometimes you're going to need confidentiality for some services and not for others. Our commitment to you in the Title X system is we protect that privacy. That is our commitment. And for 44 years, our systems have been standing in support of people like you. Many of you, I'm sure, have been patients, are being seen now. We see you for counseling, for education, for condoms, for more effective forms of birth control. We see you for lots of reasons, for sexually transmitted infection testing, for pregnancy testing, and for abortion care when you need it. That is why the systems need your presence and your voice and your advocacy. And let me tell you, wherever you are in this country, there is a system that is struggling to stay open, to meet your needs, your friends' needs, your family's needs, your neighbors' needs. This is not just about young people's access, but we want you to be a voice for community-based family planning, sexual health care, the best in the country, every state in the nation, all the sovereign nations, the federated states and the territories. Everybody needs their voice represented here, and you can do that for us so that we can be there for you. Thank you.
Great, and actually it all works out, it's supposed to. Remember, these clinics that she's talking about closing, the 326, do not provide abortion care. In addition to that, there's clinics closing because of the attack on abortion. So that is in the last few years. We are losing access to women's health services. That's reality. And I'm sort of glad we took it out of the order to help accommodate her family needs, because the next area you wouldn't think we're losing services in, but we are. We're losing services now in helping women who are victims, or not victims, survivors of violence against women. And so I'd like the whole next group to come up that is dealing with violence against women. And fill the rest of these chairs. Thank you, Latifa, very, very much. And I'm going to, in introducing Kim Gandy, who is the current national director, executive director of the National Network to End Domestic Violence, I'm going to put in some alarming things which she will then build from. But as we speak, there is a war on women's rights and services. I sort of wanted the Stop the War on Women to be the motif, because you'll understand why we're using it. All over this country right now, legislators, the same folks that want to cut family planning services, want to cut services for survivors of domestic violence. And all over this country, domestic violence shelters are now closing. There never was enough of them. And now they're closing the few that we have. It is such an outrage. And this has all happened principally since 2010. Now, Kim Gandy really needs no introduction. She was the president of the National Organization for Women for 2 terms. She also worked for the Feminist Majority as a vice president and general counsel. She also, and a lot of things that, she's worked for women's rights really since she's 19, your age, a lot of your age. And she was an attorney in private practice. Her practice was chiefly in family law, and she changed the law in the state of Louisiana, which I cannot remember, it was something like the Master's Law. You know who the master was. And I know I got the wrong name, but anyway, it was an awful law. And gave women more rights in the struggle against domestic violence many, many years ago. She's been in the trenches. She has defended individual women. She has led national organizations. She was an officer of the national organization for 22 years. And so she's been there, and I'm so excited that she's now executive director of a large domestic violence organization that is nationwide, because all those years of experience in organizing, now maybe we can turn on the offensive on this issue that has caused so much human misery and suffering in our country and frankly in the world. My friend Kim Gandy from the National Network Today, but a feminist throughout the world.
Now, I thought standing behind Ellie might make the introduction shorter, but it didn't work. You know, the National Network to End Domestic Violence was founded with Donna Edwards as the first executive director to pass the Violence Against Women Act 20 years ago, and has had a major role in really changing the landscape on domestic violence, including the domestic violence gun ban that you heard Donna and Ellie talk about. But when I became the president of NNEDV about 1.5 years ago, I said to Ellie, this is the most amazing organization that nobody's ever heard of. Because in fact, it does not have a very high profile nationally, and I'm hoping that all of you will help us with that. We've made great strides since I started out in this work as a 19-year-old, a few decades ago, when I was volunteering at a shelter in New Orleans that had no funding at all. We literally kept it open with a garage sale every single Sunday. 52 Sundays a year we had a garage sale, and that's what kept the doors of the shelter open. And that was a time when well-known leaders could refer to shelters for battered women as rest and relaxation for disgruntled housewives. Seriously, and get away with it. So we've made great strides, and in fact, you just heard about a great victory that we had this week in the Supreme Court, where on Wednesday the court upheld the law that said that convicted domestic abusers could not have firearms. And that decision was written by, you will not be surprised, Justice Sonia Sotomayor. That wise Latina came through with a common sense decision. And one of the cool things about the decision was that she repeatedly cited my organization's amicus brief in her opinion, which annoyed Justice Scalia no end. He too cited NNEDV's amicus brief, but not quite so approvingly as Justice Sotomayor had. In fact, he said that we were an advocacy organization that had, quote, a vested interest in expanding the definition of domestic violence in order to broaden the base of individuals eligible for support services. Can you imagine that we might want more individuals who are victims of violence to be eligible for support services? I mean, really? But, you know, it always gives me reassurance when we're on the wrong side of Justice Scalia. And can I just mention that without a hint of irony, in his opinion, Justice Scalia actually uses the term rule of thumb. Not in connection with beating your wife with a stick larger than your thumb. He used it in a different context, but he said it in his opinion on this case. Now, most people think, you know, when I talk about the work that I do, people look at me and like, who's against fighting domestic violence? I mean, nobody's for domestic violence. Why is your work needed? Where's the opposition? I mean, is anybody against you? Is anybody for domestic violence? Well, the reality is that there is an opposition out there, and there's an active opposition. There are men's rights organizations. There are some prominent conservative organizations that actively are out there promoting misinformation that women are every bit as violent as men are. In fact, you can go on Google, you'll find all kinds of alleged reports that women are just as violent as men. And in fact, they worked very hard to prevent reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. And they had a few big names in the right-wing constellation supporting them. But they failed. And we did win reauthorization. Now, one of our goals in this new reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which we just call VAWA, was to make sure that it finally included all victims of violence. We wanted to make sure it included Native American women on reservations, immigrant women, LGBT victims, college students, youth, public housing residents. And let me tell you, it took them 2 seconds to launch the divide and conquer strategy. And they went after all of the advocates in each of those groups saying, oh, you know, we support your thing. We want to include your group, but all of these other groups, you know, that's gonna knock the whole bill down if we put all of those other groups, trying to pull each group off of the joint coalition that had worked together for this. In fact, we were told at the end of 2012, as that Congress was winding down, that if we didn't compromise and give up some of these issues, that we would have no bill at all, that it would go down to defeat and we would have to start over from scratch in the next Congress in January. And that caused quite a panic because VAWA had already been expired technically for about 2 years at that point. It had only been reauthorized through 2010. But we all got together, we stuck together, and we said, well, if that's what happens, we'll just start over because we're not going to trade off one group's rights for another. And it did go down at the end of that Congress. Exactly what they said, it went down 16 months ago. And the hue and cry was unbelievable. We had domestic violence groups, students groups, amplified by the feminist majority, by NOW, by Ultraviolet, by students, bloggers, social media, and there was just this incredible hue and cry, which forced the Congress to bring up the Violence Against Women Act as almost literally its first act when they reopened in January, and within weeks, we had reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. And why? Because we stood together. Because we stood together, Native American women assaulted on tribal land for the first time have recourse in their courts. Because we stood together, we have the Campus SAVE Act, which forces colleges to address sexual assault and intimate partner violence on campus. Because we stood together, we have more protections for immigrant women and protections for victims living in public and subsidized housing. And because we stood together, the Violence Against Women Act is the first federal law ever to ban discrimination against LGBT people. Now, as Ellie said, there's a dire need out there. No sooner than VAWA was reauthorized than we're already fighting, trying to get the very funding that was authorized in the bill to be appropriated. It's authorized at $569 million, and yet only $417 million has been appropriated. And the cost to victims, you know what it means. So we need you. We need students. We need your voices. We need your advocacy. We need your commitment. We need your dedication to sticking together and standing up to support survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Because by sticking together, by standing up together, by supporting each other, by raising your voices, by signing up on every list that you can sign on for every organization's action alerts, you're gonna make a difference. It's not just funding, it's social change, and that's where you come in. So I hope that each of you will join us in this fight. It's not gonna be easy, it's not gonna be quick, but it will change our lives, and it will change the lives of generations of women to come. So I want to say thank you for being part of this movement for change. There's been a lot of talk about Gloria Steinem's 80th birthday, about passing the torch. And I just want to say, Ellie, the reinforcements have arrived and they've brought their own torches. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing two really amazing women and good friends. Lorraine Steinberg, I first knew as an actor, and then as an activist, as a feminist, as a leader, as a filmmaker, and as a friend. A really, really extraordinary human being who has produced more than a dozen, I guess 14 now, documentary films and action-oriented films that change people's minds, from keeping the clinic doors open to testing rape kits to changing the FBI definition of rape to one that's going to be introduced today. Really an extraordinary human being. And Lorraine, come on up, introduce your film. But I also want to introduce Susan Rubin, who is not the Susan Rubin who's listed in your program. We don't really know who that Susan Rubin is. But this Susan Rubin is a playwright, a writer, a script writer, a blogger for Feminist Majority and Ms. Magazine. She does voiceovers, and she has been Lorraine Steinberg's partner in creating these incredible, incredible works of art that change people and move them. So, Lorraine and Susan.
You guys, you women and men who are here today are so lucky because you're at the beginning of your lives, and you haven't made any real commitments yet to the path you're going to take, but you're learning. And today, you've heard from all these extraordinary activists. I didn't become an activist until I was 50. I'm 77. So I'm the oldest person in this building, except for a waiter upstairs in the Sky Dome who looks like Albert Einstein. So. But I care passionately. I've got 6 grandchildren, 4 of whom are in college. This is when you can really screw up your life or make a wonderful commitment to say yes to everything if it's something you really want. You can always say no, except in matters of physical violence. And I feel very strongly about the idea of sexual violence on college campuses. Many years ago, I saw a movie that has just ripped my heart out, and I'll never forget it. It was called The Magdalena Sisters, and it was 14 minutes of a rape scene, starting with the most innocent, beautiful, bucolic, gorgeous farmhouse in Ireland, most beautiful young girl, most beautiful young boy, family, joyous, and then life changed in an instant, and what you now know is Philomena, sort of. I mean, it all comes together. It's that one act that changes everything. Consent is essential if you're going to have a sexual relationship. Consent must be given. And our schools, there are roughly 4,000 college campuses in this country, and our goal in the film that we've made is to get you to be activists on your campus, to make your campuses pay attention to your safety. I mean, you've just left home. You've left your parents. You've left the rules you've lived by. You've left your community. You don't know anything. I'm sorry, but you're very naive. I know you all. I mean, I have you in my family. I really know you. And your judgment, especially some of the boys, is sort of impaired. And there are a lot of feminists who don't agree, young feminists who don't agree with the effects of drugs and alcohol. I've seen it in my family. I know it's true. You know, your judgment is impaired. It doesn't mean you invite rape, but you're less defended. Thank God my one young granddaughter is taking Krav Maga, the Israeli defense system, and she's, you know, she is scared, and she's gorgeous, and she's a musician and walks alleys of Hollywood, but now she's a killer, and it's, yeah, I feel much better about that. But watch the film. What we have to say I think will apply to all of you, and spread the message on your campuses, please. Susan wrote the words. Susan Rubin is my other self, and she's the one with the great voice. So I may have been the actress, but she is the narrator, and she speaks the words we have agreed upon. Thank you for being here, and anybody who can't see the screens, move up. It's worth your time. It's about 14 minutes. Susan, do you want to say anything? No. Okay, Susan's not speaking. You'll hear her on the video. Thank you.
You're in college. You're living on your own. But classroom learning is not all that's happening on U.S. campuses. We all have a lot more to learn.
It is estimated that 1 in 5 women on college campuses has been sexually assaulted during their time there. 1 in 5. It's totally unacceptable.
A young woman entering college is at the most vulnerable time in her life, not knowing what to expect or who they will meet. There will be no warning about potential risks. Nobody understands this reality better than Jeannie Cleary's family.
We got back at 2:30 in the afternoon. There was a police car in our driveway. And we didn't know what had happened. Thought possibly the burglar alarm had gone off, although Catherine, who always
Let me explain what happened. Our taxi drew up to the door. There were the 2 policemen with Catherine. Catherine, they were restraining her. And when I asked, was it Grandma? And they said no. I knew it was something so horrible. It would change our lives eternally. And so I said, please don't tell me until I sit down. And as I came down this long corridor, I said the Our Father out loud. And then I finished, and I sat down, and I said, okay. And they told me.
The news was as bad as she feared. Connie Cleary's daughter, Jean, a freshman at Lehigh College, had been raped and murdered. Connie's grief forced her to take action.
I can remember the week after wanting to do something to spare others of this horrible happening.
The Cleary Act became federal law in 1990, mandating that schools receiving federal funds must report all crime on campus to the FBI.
The students, faculty, and employees on the campuses will be informed so that they know about the crimes around them, and then they can take the precautions. It will not be an effective law unless the campus families try to protect themselves.
Gotta take a shot to get in. Gotta take a shot to get in. Hello, Blue. No spilling, no spilling. Oh, jeez. Oh, I don't mess with. Is that your girlfriend? She's mine now.
But the Cleary Act was no match for life on campus. The newfound freedom, the acquaintances you don't really know, the parties, all of which contribute to sexual assault.
The flyer is titled Top 10 Ways to Get Away with Rape. It was found in a boys' bathroom in McBride Hall on Miami University's. Among the ideas on the flyer, putting a drug in a woman's drink, wear protection, and practice makes perfect were many other ideas listed.
It all started right here on the U of A campus when one student wrote 3 words on a poster board. You deserve rape.
You deserve rape!
Frat boys from Delta Kappa Epsilon at Yale University were filmed doing a ritual to initiate new pledges. Check it out.
No means yes. Yes means anal. No means yes. Yes means anal. No means yes. Yes means anal.
Did you guys catch that? No means yes, and yes means anal. Fraternities across the country are doing their own advertising when it comes to getting a woman in their beds against her will.
What is rape?
Rape would be when someone forcefully has sex with another person.
Any sex that is not consensual. It doesn't matter if it's a guy or girl.
I would see it as any sort of penetration, be it male to male, male to female, female to male, female to female.
More specifically, it's penetration of the vagina by anything, objects, fingers, penis, anything. It is unwanted, and it's unwanted. And there's also an element of a lack of consent there.
What is consent?
Consent to one form of sexual activity can't be seen to imply consent to any other form of sexual activity. If somebody kisses you, you have consent to kiss.
But you can't have consent for anything if the person you're with is incapacitated, drunk, or drugged.
Well, okay. Slow down. a
Men
little bit.
assaulting
Okay.
women
Okay,
is not the only problem.
Stop. I asked you to stop.
Don't rush me.
Stop.
Told him, hey, don't touch me without asking first.
Don't be a passive bystander.
I have to go see her.
I'm gonna come with you then. Mama, how you doing tonight?
Thank God Taylor was there, because he really gave me a way out.
You could argue that the rules on rape and sexual assault are complicated. They're really not. They can be boiled down to this. If you want to have sex with a man or a woman, a partner, get their permission.
Just past my 18th birthday, I was date raped. That is how I lost my virginity. I was like beyond inebriated, like slurring my words and like having a hard time. I was like the running joke. Oh my God, why did this happen to me? Blaming myself. Can we stop telling girls that they shouldn't get raped and instead tell men to stop raping women? If someone rapes you, it is the rapist's fault, not yours. I wish I had someone that told me that wasn't my fault and that I should speak up.
Gloria Allred, nationally known activist attorney for women, is telling victims of sexual assault how to speak up.
I was victim to sexual violence as a freshman at Swarthmore.
My sophomore year at USC, I was raped by a fellow student.
My freshman year, I was raped at a party during the first week of school.
The weekend after my first week of classes as a freshman at Occidental College, I was raped by a male student. I was raped during my freshman year at Occidental by a male student.
I was raped my freshman year at Occidental College.
I was sexually assaulted by another student at Occidental College.
At the beginning of my final semester, a fellow student raped me in my own bedroom. They found him guilty of rape and gave him a one-semester suspension. An administrator who had never once spoken to me about the case decided to change his punishment to a book report and community service.
I was raped by a classmate in the dorm provided to me by UConn. A hearing took place the following month, and the perpetrator that I had reported was found guilty on 4 counts, that he was to be expelled. 2 weeks later, I was eating in a dining hall when the perpetrator sat down next to me and threateningly grazed my elbow in an act of obvious defiance. Shocked, I left, feeling confused, violated, traumatized, and vulnerable. The administration had kept the findings the same, but changed the sanction and readmitted my rapist. The only explanation I was given was that the Vice President of Student Affairs felt that expulsion for having raped me was too severe.
How did the administration at University of Connecticut respond?
Suggestion that the University of Connecticut, as an institution, would somehow be indifferent to or dismissive of any report of sexual assault is astonishingly misguided and demonstrably untrue.
The question isn't, do you have a problem? The question is your institution confronting the problem with honesty, with integrity?
Early this morning, a complaint was filed on behalf of a number of victims with the Office of Civil Rights against Occidental College for violating Title IX. The complaint documents violations.
Campus sexual assault is happening from coast to coast, including military colleges, religious institutions, public and private colleges.
28 schools under scrutiny for sexual violence right now related to Title IX violations, including Dartmouth, including the University of North Carolina, Princeton, Harvard Law School as well.
Why these schools don't properly investigate these situations. They kind of just brush it under the rug. And obviously, it's because these administrators don't want their university to have a bad name.
Right. Now, you know what gives you a really bad reputation? If you don't investigate rapes.
Things are changing. Lisa Simpson brought a Title IX complaint against University of Colorado Boulder after she was raped at a party for the football team. The university paid out over $5 million in penalties, and the university president, athletics director, and football coach resigned. Things are changing. Activists across the country are bringing sexual assault to people's attention and demanding a change. Your group can act now to stop sexual assault on your campus. Demand a committee comprised of students and administrators to address the issue by creating a sex education program that is mandatory for every student at your school.
Guess what I'm gonna do to her?
And young men are changing.
Real men treat women with respect.
Be a part of the solution.
By not saying something, kind of being a part of the situation as well. Be educated and try to educate others.
Get educated on what sexual assault is. You know, some things that you might not think are assault actually are.
We've got to teach young people, men and women, to be brave enough to stand up and help put an end to these crimes. We've especially got to teach young men to show women the respect they deserve. I want every young man in America to know that real men do not hurt women.
Stop it. You're making all white guys look bad.
Stop it, because you're making all black guys look bad.
Stop it. You're making all Hispanics look bad.
Stop it. You're making all chemistry majors look bad.
Stop it. You're making all Asian guys look bad.
I will sign a presidential memorandum creating the White House task force to protect students from sexual assault.
And we've got powerful friends, and they just reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, including a new provision called SAVE, the Campus Sexual Violence Elimination Act. We dedicate this film to Connie Cleary, who devoted her life to turning her loss into a powerful tool to get justice for victims of sexual assault. Join the feminist majority and activists across the country in the campaign to end campus sexual assault.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Susan, for creating this tool for all of us. We do recognize that we're running late. The workshops will start a little bit late. We'll make sure that you get the full period of your workshop. It may cut into your lunch a little bit, but there are lots of lunch options nearby. So you may only get an hour instead of an hour 15 for lunch, but it'll all be good because you will really want to hear from the next speaker. Laura Dunn is a survivor, an activist, a law student, the founder of Serve Justice, and she also founded PAVE's Survivor Justice Campaign, and she successfully lobbied to pass the Compassionate Care for Rape Victims bill in the state of Wisconsin and Jasmine's Law in Illinois. Please welcome Laura Dunn.
To add to that list, I was a voice that spoke for the Campus SAVE Act with the House Democratic leadership and with the Senate Judiciary Committee. I have exposed myself as a rape victim, and I use the word expose because I have to open myself up every single time that I identify as a rape victim. But I am not ashamed, nor should anyone ever be ashamed of being a victim of crime. We are much more than victims. We are actually survivors, and we are defiant in the face of institutions that do not help us when we ask. I want every single person in here to be inspired today. If you are a feminist, you must stand against sexual violence because it is
keeping us from our education in colleges. It is keeping us from our jobs. It is everywhere in society. In fact, women are exposed to violence from the moment they are born to the moment they die. We will always be at risk of sexual violence, and we must fight against that and, more importantly, demand justice. It's not just about social change. It is about actually giving sanctions to schools that will do nothing. It is about making sure perpetrators never harm another person. It is about having rights that we enforce and demand every day with response from our government. I want to say, thank you. I want to be very clear that campus sexual assault is both prevalent and preventable. We often hear the statistic, 20 to 25% of women will become victims of crime, but only looking at victimization is the problem with our society. It is not about who is being victimized, it is about who is creating victims by harming them. Dr. David Lissac, who is on that video, has done amazing research, and he has found that only 6 to 12% of men on campus are committing these crimes, but they have an average of 6 victims. This is a repeat offense. And as much as silence is very much a valid choice for every survivor, it is the reason this continues and continues and continues. And it is not the only reason. The true reason is that the few who dare to speak up and identify and call out those perpetrators are then silenced by our society, by our institutions. And that's why I encourage you all to come to Rape is Rape so that we can talk about your rights, because both Title IX and the Clery Act are actually helping you on campus. In fact, just this last month, that Violence Against Women Act that you've been hearing about, it went into effect. So all those rights for campus sexual assault survivors are active now on your campus, and you need to know what they are. You need to know how to file a complaint against your institution. And guess what? You don't have to be a victim to file a complaint. You just have to be affected by a hostile environment. So if you see something on your campus that you know is part of rape culture, you can file a complaint with the federal government. You can add your school to that list and say, this is enough. No more. So to give you all a little piece of action that you can do right now, there's been a lot of scrutiny in the media from the Wall Street Journal, from Time Magazine, saying that campus sexual assault is overinflated. There isn't a problem with rape culture. This is just feminist ridiculousness, and we know that that is not true. And so I want you all, before you leave this room, ideally, you can do it right now as I talk, get out your Twitter feed and type the hashtag in, rape culture is when, and you tell the world what is rape culture, where is it on your campus, and what you are going to do about it. Because we cannot let men in the media start saying that this is a lie when we know it is truth. So speak out and demand that everything on your campus changes so that everyone is safe. Thank you.
If you missed that hashtag, it's hashtag rape culture is when, fill in the blank. And now, please welcome Sade Adebayo, who is part of the FMLA family. She was co-president of the Spelman College Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance and is currently working on a sexual health and safety place-based dual-generation intervention for youth and families in DC public housing neighborhoods. Sade.
I'm Sade, and I'm also a survivor of sexual assault, both as a child and as a young adult. And I'm here today to let you know a little bit about what we're doing. I work at the Urban Institute on a place-based sexual health and safety intervention with DC public housing residents, where they're learning every day that their bodies are being violated just as a means to survive, and they're making very difficult decisions just so that their families can make ends meet. I also sit on the board of the Black Women's Blueprint, which is a human rights organization where one of our major efforts is dedicated to ending and addressing sexual assault and its unique impact on our community. We've worked really hard on how to talk about rape culture with students, and we've designed a training institute specifically to empower students and teach them better bystander response and how to be critical consumers of our social media and just movies and videos and all kinds of images that try to sell violence against women as sexy and that repeat very ridiculous victim-blaming rhetoric like she shouldn't have been out that late, or she shouldn't have been wearing that, or how many sexual partners has she had in the past, so is it really rape? But I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, but rape doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't have anything to do with what you're wearing, doesn't have anything to do with what you look like or how many partners you've had in the past. It's about patriarchy's need to dominate. We live in a society that teaches don't get raped rather than don't rape, and where young women are giving rape bristles during their college orientations, for example. Is that acceptable? I thought you all would say that, and so I'm really encouraged by your presence today. It's really encouraging and sends the resounding message that you stand with us and you too are committed to the work of denormalizing violence in our communities. You're dedicated to our collective healing and safety, and that you believe that we all deserve to walk freely in this world without fear. At least 1 in 5 women here in the United States alone experience some form of sexual violence by the time she's 18. And we know that that number gets even more insidious when we think about women of the diaspora and those of us with different levels of socioeconomic access. All over the world, our sisters, mothers, daughters, friends, our fathers, sons, and brothers included are struggling to stand upright in this global crooked room. So I would like to thank Ellie and her wonderful team at FMF for making this happen and for putting all of you energetic folks together, over 650 feminists in one space. All of you in one space to dialogue and strategize around real issues that matter now. You all know we're wrapping up Women's History Month, and as we prepare for today, we cannot forget the real lives and stories behind these conversations that we're going to have. So if you don't mind, please join with me in just a moment to honor our survivors and to remember those of us who didn't. I thank you for that moment. Yes. It takes courage, and it also takes our support to make sure that no one feels ashamed of the crime that's been inflicted upon them. So again, I thank you all for coming out, and I look forward to the mobilizing conversations that we're going to be having throughout the day and tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, we are on speed dial right now, and I'm really excited to introduce to you a lead plaintiff in the case known as Prop 8. We're switching from violence against women, violence against people, transgender, lesbian, gay, anyone, to institutional violence, a different type of violence. And I want to just let Chris speak for herself. Chris Perry, please join us. She's a plaintiff in the Prop 8 case. She has a documentary coming out at the end in theaters in select cities shortly called The Case Against 8. And she said the one slogan she wanted everybody to remember today is battles are won because you fight them. Please welcome Chris Perry.
Good morning, almost afternoon. Thank you, DeVern. And I just want to say I am inspired and energized and electrified by everything you're doing here today. And I appreciate you shifting gears for a minute and talking about what happened in California and is happening all across this country, where lesbian and gay people, frankly, people, are being discriminated against based on their gender. Purely that. I could have been married in California during Prop 8 if I wanted to marry a man. Someone told me that. You can get married. You just can't marry the woman you love, but you could marry one of the male plaintiffs. That's fine. You know, yes, I could have, and haven't hundreds, if not thousands of people married someone that they weren't in love with because that's all they were permitted to do. Getting married, the decision to be married, the decision to love someone as an adult is one of the most significant decisions you make as an adult. Your parents don't decide it for you. Your friends don't decide it for you. You decide, will you be with someone? How long will you be with them? What will you do about that relationship? That's your decision. And in fact, one of the expert witnesses in our trial testified to the fact that we almost define adulthood based on the fact that you may now marry. I know that you're younger. I know that this may seem like it's a distant decision that won't affect you right now. And one of the reasons Sandy and I fought this battle was that we didn't want you to have to worry about it. We have 4 boys. 4 boys. The youngest twins are 19. They're somewhere out in District of Columbia right now. I don't know where. That's why I'm rushing, because I was like, where are you? What are you doing? I keep saying, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And we have been raising them to care a lot about social justice, care a lot about themselves and the people they love. And this incident that we were involved in California, where our constitutional right to decide whether or not we would be married was taken away from us on the very same day that President Barack Obama was elected, was one of the most difficult days that I've had as an adult, and I think many of you can remember back to that time. So let me remind you very quickly of what happened. In California, in 2004, Gavin Newsom said that in San Francisco, same-sex couples could go get married, so Sandy and I did. We literally got in our car and sped across the Bay Bridge and got married. Who does that? Who does that? Do straight couples do that? No. But we did that. We dragged our kids out of school. They were horrified and embarrassed, and they still came with us to San Francisco City Hall. We got married right before Rosie O'Donnell, so there were thousands of news trucks, even though we promised them no one would take their picture. And we went home, and we called all of our friends and family and said, you're not going to believe this, we're married, and they were thrilled for us. And we had a huge ceremony later that year where everybody could come and celebrate with us. But just before that day, 2 weeks before that day, we got a letter in the mail, form letter. Dear Chris Perry, dear Sandy Steer, we regret to inform you, your marriage has been revoked. If you would like your marriage license fees returned to you, we will send them to you, or you can have them donated to charity. 2 weeks later, we went and had this ceremony anyway. It was shameful and humiliating. We felt embarrassed for ourselves, for our friends and family, that they knew we still could not make this simple decision in our lives, that the government was taking our right to make this decision away from us willy-nilly, one day, this day, that day, every day. So in 2008, when the California Supreme Court said, yes, you can get married in California, and 18,000 couples did what we did in 2004, went speeding off to all the local city clerk's offices and got married, guess what happened? Some folks that wanted to protect children and protect marriage went to the ballot and said to the voters of California, do you or don't you want gay people getting married? And 52% of them said, we don't. So we lost the right again. Now, Sandy and I were in a position to not get hurt by that a second time, and we stood out. We stayed on the sidelines. We did not get married. We're raising 4 boys. We have really busy jobs. We have big families. We have a life. We were really, really, really not in a position to get in our car and drive across the Bay Bridge again. So we didn't get married with those 18,000 couples. And a few months later, we were so angry and so upset that we filed suit. Perry versus Schwarzenegger. Just so happened I was a Schwarzenegger appointee at the time. And I said to him and to all the people running the state of California, this state should never defend this law. I am a leader in this state. I care deeply about it. Born and raised, all my kids, same thing. I want to be married in this state. I want to be proud of where I work and who I work for, and I am fighting this, and we're going to the Supreme Court, and we did. Exactly 1 year ago, March 26th, our family went to the Supreme Court. We stood with our lawyers. Same day Edie Windsor went, another true American hero, And we argued that our due process and equal protection rights have been violated by the state of California and that we should not be banned from making this simple decision to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And thank you to the justices who spoke out on our behalf, and I'm really ashamed of the ones who did not. And luckily, a few months later, June 26th, they ruled that the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional, thank God. And they also decided that the other side, the people that want to protect children and defend marriage, actually had no standing, had no right to even be at the Supreme Court. So they threw the case out, which basically let us get married. So before I go, I'll tell you where we stand today. Since that original ruling declared that Prop 8 was unconstitutional, 2 days later, we were able to get married, first couple to get married in California after the ban was lifted by Attorney General Kamala Harris, fabulous American hero. And we have gone on with our lives. But I want to tell you this. There are still so many states that have bans. As you know, there are many, many states now striking down these bans in federal court. 48 cases pending right now that are going to rely on the DOMA rulings and the Hollingsworth versus Perry rulings so that those bans go away. And I really do think within 5 years you'll see marriage equality in this country for you, because you need to know that you have the right to decide this, and you do not live in a state that inflicts this kind of discrimination and harm on anybody that you know or love. It's not good for anybody. Last thing I'll say. There are also states where if I were married, I am married, if I were living there and put a picture of myself and my wife up on my desk at work, I'd get fired because there is no employment discrimination protection in more than 30 states. So I just want to say, that's the next frontier. There are so many other fights. You're dealing with really important issues. Don't forget LGBT employment discrimination laws as well. Thank you.
Yes, and we have so many heroes in this room and people who stand out. Chris, we want to thank you for breaking down a barrier, and we're going to finish that battle yet. And another major hero on the stage is Isabel Vargas. And we wanted to make sure, from Salem State University, you can hear that. We wanted to make sure that people knew that a part of the civil rights fight is the fight for immigration justice. And the terrible effect of the lack of comprehensive immigration reform on women. Families are being deported, families are being torn apart. But Isabel has a fight that so many brave people are standing up, so many young people and so many young women. Isabel is an undocumented immigrant, and so every day has been precarious for her. Just the fight to attend college, the fight to get, even though she's here for her life, the fight to get a decent acceptance, to state tuitions, the fight to get a job because you don't have either a driver's license or a Social Security number. It's a daily fight. Part of that has been solved because the president has signed President Obama signed an executive order that gives undocumented students, the Dreamers, a Social Security number so they can get a job and the ability to get a driver's license. And so that is a step. But still, every day is a fight because they do not have an avenue to citizenship through no fault of their own. It's a disgrace, okay? Where we are, just awful. We import people knowingly to exploit them and to pay them less, and then keep them in this outrageous temporary status the rest of their life. I feel this issue very passionately. I'm a daughter of immigrants. This is not something new in this century. It's been going on that we exploit cheap labor in every way we can, and then we praise them that we're a country of immigrants. But that first generation is made miserable, and it must stop. And so I really admire what you're doing, Isabel, standing up, risking all for that dream. But it's more than a dream. You have a basic human right and civil right, and we've got to recognize it. Isabel Vargas.
So thank you for that beautiful introduction. I was very impressed. So y'all making me nervous, so many of you. So before I started, I wanted to say my name is Isabel, and I come from Salem State, so shout out to the Salem State. We have one of the biggest delegations here. So I'm gonna start. My story starts in the Dominican Republic in 2001. I'm an immigrant, Dominicans. I was 8 years old, and my sister and I migrated to the United States. Growing up, my parents stressed the importance of an education. They would tell me, Isabel, tienes que estudiar y hacer bien en la escuela. Isabel, you have to study and get good grades. And so from a young age, I understood that education had to be taken seriously. In my life, there's been 3 main events that have changed it. The first one was finding out that I was undocumented, that I could never go back home to see my family, that I wouldn't be allowed to work in the United States or even obtain a driver's license. It meant that if I was at a party in college and the cops came, I had to be the first one running out. Because if I was found, I could be deported. That every day, I had to think about my father, whether he was gonna make it from work or not. And that any day, my family could be split apart. The second event that changed my life was when my grandmother passed away. And she passed away in the Dominican Republic. And my father never got to say goodbye to her. He never got to hug her, and he never got to see her again. So growing up, I was constantly reminded that immigration affected me. And the third event was June 2008, a trip to DC with the purpose of lobbying for immigration reform. I was 15 and a half. I met Mario Rodas. In 2005, immigration had come to Mario's house with a warrant for another person. The ICE officer questioned the family, realized that Mario was undocumented, and they took him to a detention center. Mario spent only a couple of days in jail, but was released because of the community put enough pressure on senators and House of Representatives to stop his deportation. Today, Mario is a citizen of the United States of America, and he's also LGBTQ. So just like Mario, there were hundreds of students becoming involved with immigration, and so I thought, why not? I want to do this. I want to be able to speak up for myself. And I got tired of seeing my parents work so hard and always relying on immigration reform. I got tired of seeing my mom with so much fear, whether a cop stopped her, whether she was going to come home or not. And I was tired of being in the shadows of the immigration system that exists to keep people out. And I joined the immigration movement and started to advocate for the DREAM Act, a legislation that would give a pathway to citizenship for undocumented students. During that time, it was the first time that undocumented students were coming out and telling their friends, their teachers, parents, not parents, you know, and institutions that were undocumented. So the movement grew in 2009. And within SIM and the national network, United We Dream, we led actions in order to get more support for the DREAM Act. And in 2010, the DREAM Act failed in the Senate by a couple of votes. We had stopped deportations of students, gotten so much support, and I felt that our work wasn't recognized. But we weren't gonna give up. We kept fighting so students wouldn't get deported and fought anti-immigrant amendments locally. In 2012, President Obama gave deferred action through executive action to Dreamers. so that students like myself would get a Social Security and a pathway to citizenship and protected status, while Congress fixed immigration. And although policies have changed and things are better today, I'm still one of the few undocumented students attending university in the country. I want other students to have access to higher education the same way I did. Last summer, I sat with the administration to have SSU become undocumented friendly. Now SSU is one of the first few universities in the state and in the country to be undocumented friendly. We now have staff in admissions working with undocumented students. We have scholarships, and we also have a better application process so students could apply online. So the immigration movement, the women's rights movement, LGBTQ, reproductive rights still goes on. Our work isn't done, right? We gotta keep fighting. Because women are still being taken advantage of and abused. Whether you are a person of color or not, whether you are LGBTQ or an immigrant, our fight continues. So ask yourself, how can I make a bigger impact in my community? How can we reduce the suffering in our campus and homes? And the advice I give you is to speak up. Get involved, get your friends, parents involved. We all have a struggle, and together we can overcome them. Only when we organize ourselves and fight together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel, and I know that we're going to triumph. Actually, she gave a really big pitch to these activist pledge cards. Look in, it's a yellow sheet of paper in your folder, and it's there. It's at the back. I don't know why we put it at the back, but it is. And at least it's yellow, so you can see it. And think, we've hit so many issues on purpose in this opening session. So you could see the multiplicity of the issues that are desperately in need of your voice and your activism. And look at them all and decide what is it that you and your group wants to do. And if you don't have a group, think about launching one. Think about changing the climate of your campus or, and making it safe for more. Also think about voting rights. We haven't hit that yet. We're going to do that because, as you know, there's a whole time now, or there's a whole movement to suppress the student vote. You can make a difference. That's why. The movement to suppress is because students have made a difference. In 2012, more people from the age of 18 to 29 voted. It was 19% of the electorate. For the first time, I believe, than people over 65, which in that election, 2012, was only 16% of the electorate. In 2010, quite a different result. Only about, I think it's 37% of that age group voted, 18 to 29. And over 70% of the over 65s. Now, come on. You've got your whole life to live in this, in the laws that are being made. Your voice should be much, much larger in every race, whether it's a presidential or not. And 2014 is not a presidential race. But we need students for ballot measures all over this country. Ballot measures on almost all the issues that we've talked about will be on the ballot, and that's one of the workshops of all the issues. There'll be anti-choice, anti-reproductive choice measures. There's measures on raising the minimum wage. There's measures on labor rights. I mean, it goes on. And so if we have to win this state by state, we'll win it state by state. But we have got to have an electorate that represents, in fact, the people of this country, and people 18 to 29 must be voting and voting and voting. Now, I saved the president of NOW, is a dear friend also, and for a reason, and she's been great to hang in there for us. One is Terry's going to be in the townhouse, town hall this afternoon, so you'll see her again. But there's another reason. National Organization for Women is a multi-issue group, just like the feminist majority. And it fights on all these issues. But it does more. It takes on the opposition when it's not comfortable to take on the opposition. It doesn't wait to see what the polls say. I'm having trouble with my voice. It doesn't, we've been up around the clock. We're so glad you're here and it's almost over. No, I didn't mean it that way. No, these things are easy to put on. But anyway, it takes on the opposition and it takes the tough issues before we know if they're going to be popular or not, because it's marching to a drummer of social justice and equality for all. And that drumbeat is loud right now because we are in the midst of a right wing that wants to push us back, and we're going to say no, and we're taking them on. Terry O'Neill has been fighting for women's rights for several decades. She also, like so many of the people here, fought to go to law school. Maybe not at the traditional age, or did you do the traditional? Close to the traditional age. We do it all different ages. That's why I'm saying you're making decisions now, you can change them too. Anyway, she was a lawyer, a law professor, and then changed her life again and became a social activist and has been a leader for the National Organization for Women. She's in her second term. She's been a sister in the struggle. We have stood we've stood shoulder to shoulder. I wear a double hat. I'm very proud that I'm the co-chair of the National Organization for Women Advisory Board, and I'm very proud of the work we do shoulder to shoulder together. And Terry also is one of these people that has fun doing this. She just loves taking them on, has a spirit of taking them on. And so I'm proud to introduce my friend Terry O'Neill, who's been a voice for equal rights and is taking them on.
So my remarks start off, good morning, everyone, but I'm going to say good afternoon, and I'm going to be fast. First off, Ellie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that really generous introduction, and thank you for organizing this conference. I know how much work it is to organize this conference. This room is electric. You guys have been absolutely inspiring to me. I want to thank you all for being here. And I especially want to thank you in advance for the work that I know you're going to leave this conference and you're going to do a lot of work. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is the work that I want you to do. First of all, Isabel, thank you so much for your courage. It is really, really inspiring. Now, for those of you who don't know, there is a wonderful campaign called We Belong Together. It is a campaign of the National Coalition on Immigrant Women's Rights. Go to WeBelongTogether.org. They are doing some amazing things. I joined together with 114 other women, 23 of whom were brave, undocumented women. Last September, we blocked an intersection on Capitol Hill, and we got arrested. And the purpose of it, And the purpose of it was to draw attention to the needs of immigrant women in the fight for comprehensive immigration reform. We are continuing that struggle. On April 7th, 8th, and 9th, I will be with my sisters in the struggle on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. for a fast. We will be doing a 48-hour fast for families. Go to #FAST4Families. You can find out a lot more information about it, also at WeBelongTogether.org. We are working together. The National Organization for Women has really always taken an intersectional approach to women's full equality, right? We connect the dots: racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, all the isms that divide us and pull us apart. Cisism, absolutely. So we talk about and gendered and sorry, we talk about all the ways in which people who are different from one another, one of the best ways to keep us all down is to keep us fighting with each other. And the National Organization for Women has always taken a view that we need to link arms because we do face dangerous times. And that's one of the things that we're doing this year especially. As Ellie said, 2014 may be one of the most important election years that our community will face, right? In 2010, the so-called Rising American Electorate, also known as the Obama Coalition, right? These are overlapping communities of color, immigrant voters, younger voters, and unmarried women. Those individuals stayed home in huge numbers in 2010. And what did we see in 2010? What happened that very year? The Tea Party flooded into state legislatures, flooded into the United States Congress. And since that time, we have seen scores of family planning clinics shut down for political reasons because we didn't vote in large enough numbers in 2010. We're not going to let that happen again in 2014, right? I was going to talk a little bit about the reason why we have to vote, and one of the main reasons is because of the deep connection between economic justice and women's access to basic reproductive health care services, including birth control and including abortion care. Make no mistake, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion by the age of 45. It is a common and necessary aspect of women's reproductive health services, and we will not stop fighting until abortion services are available on the same basis as every other health care service is available to everyone in this country. And contraception is basic health care for women. And those people who come at me and say, oh, I'm pro-life, so that's why I'm against birth control, what I have to say to them is this: you call yourself pro-life, what are you doing to lower infant mortality rates and maternal mortality rates in the United States of America? Just over half of unintended pregnancies in this country, just over half of all pregnancies in this country are unintended, and unintended pregnancy is highly correlated with infant mortality and with maternal mortality, and is moreover a significant risk factor for domestic violence, homicide. Don't call yourself pro-life. And while we're at it, let's talk just a moment about religious liberty. So the man in charge of Hobby Lobby stores and Conestoga Wood Specialties and 98 other for-profit and nonprofit organizations. Oh yes, there are 100 entities that have sued the United States government to restrict birth control in this country. We call them the Dirty 100. We're calling it the Dirty 100. You can sign our petition on now.org that you will not do business, and you will tell all your friends not to do business with anyone in the Dirty 100. These guys may have a religious liberty right, just like I do, just like every person in this room does. Of course they do. A religious liberty right under the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. But I have read that Constitution backwards and forwards, and I cannot find a constitutional right to be a CEO of any organization, let alone a craft store. There is no constitutional right to be an employer who withholds basic health care from one set of employees, namely women, while providing the full range of health care needs for the men. There is no constitutional right, and religious liberty does not include that kind of a right. Okay, so now, even if it did, let's talk a little bit about his so-called religious liberty rights, and we'll talk about our individual constitutional rights. Women have the same religious liberty rights as any man, any CEO of a craft store. So does that balance it out? Well, wait, we have a right to the equal protection of the laws, and when you selectively take out women's health care, that's a violation of the equal protection of the laws. Women have a right of privacy to make their own health care decisions. Under Griswold versus Connecticut, the law cannot restrict birth control. So let's balance. You have, Mr. Hobby Lobby, religious liberty, you say? We've got religious liberty, we've got equal protection, we've got privacy rights, we win. We are, in fact, winning the battle of ideas in this country. We are. The more these entities, the more the Catholic bishops, the more the Hobby Lobbies and the right-wing extremists attack women's access to reproductive health care, the more they shut down family planning clinics, guess what's happening out there among voters' attitudes? Support for basic abortion rights has gone up. And I predict it will go up again and again and again. That's because we're winning the war of ideas. But we will not win these policy wars. We cannot win these policy battles unless we vote. And guess what? The folks who are against us know that very well. They know that very well. There are some very smart, well-paid, extremely well-funded organizations that are figuring out on a daily and weekly basis how to suppress the vote of every single part of the Obama coalition, the communities of color, immigrant communities, younger voters, and unmarried women. The way they're attacking the unmarried women's vote is to flood the airwaves with disinformation about the Affordable Care Act and what it does for women. Now look, the Affordable Care Act is not perfect. No way is it perfect. We fought hard in the National Organization for Women we want single-payer health care. That's what everyone should have in this country. But during the health care debate, we fought hard for a public option, and we didn't get it. We fought hard against abortion, against restrictions on abortion care, and we didn't get that. That said, the Affordable Care Act provides many things for women that we have never had before. The days of gender rating are over, and that's a good thing. The days of pre-existing conditions are over, and that's a good thing. Young people can stay on their parents' health care until the age of 26, and in this economic environment, that's a very good thing. But the folks that don't want us to vote are out there saying Obamacare is bad, everybody hates Obamacare. Go on up with Chris Hayes. All right, in the past week, he interviewed a woman, very nice-looking woman. She looked like she was really concerned, and she just exploded on air talking about how women hate Obamacare and it's not good for their families and they hate Obamacare because they're mothers. I call that dog whistle messaging. It is wrong. It is racist. And frankly, as a white woman, I'm offended that she would think I would fall for something like that. So we're not fooled, and we are going to vote. So flooding the airways with disinformation and dog whistle talk about Obamacare instead of calling it the Affordable Care Act, that's one way. Communities of color, ending extended voting, specifically aimed at communities of color. intimidating people and voters in immigrant communities who are afraid that if they go vote or if they go get their identification to vote, someone in their family or their neighborhood or their friends will get a visit from ICE. That is not okay. So here's what I want you to do. We are going to say, everyone in this room, we're already almost to go to lunch, right? So let's everybody stand up. Just stand up for me. Yes. All right, yeah. All right, I want you, all right, all of you, I want to take a pledge. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. On my honor, I will bring 20 people to the polls. 20 people to the polls. 20 people to the polls in Pennsylvania. In Texas. In North Carolina. In Virginia. In Kansas and Wisconsin and Indiana. In Tennessee and Florida and Michigan. And in Oklahoma. Those are all states, woohoo, Oklahoma. Those are all states where shameful voting restrictions have been enacted. We're going to fight that. We're going to go to the polls. We will overwhelm these people. And we will take our country back. Thank you so much, everybody.
I want to tell, and don't move a minute. We are enrolling people. Enroll America's here for Affordable Care Act. And if you haven't done it, the deadline is not March 31st if you tried and couldn't do it. In other words, they've extended it a little bit because of computer glitches, if you'd already tried. But you can try here. And if you don't have it, we've got it here. Also, look at those activism pledges. I know Terry said 20. She's magnificent, but we can do better than that. And we're going to keep on doing it. And now DeVern Gaines has some announcements, but I have one. I want to thank DeVern. I want to thank, I know before, I don't want to do it at the end. I want to do it now. I want to thank our campus team, and I want to thank our Feminist Majority Foundation staff that has been working. Carmen Rios, Galen Burrows, Edwith, Maddie, they're not, Christy, they're not in the room maybe right now, but also if you look at the tables, you'll see a lot of people at the tables. They are all volunteers too, but there's been everybody pitched in. We've had our, people that had nothing to do with the program who are on our staff working for this. Thank them, I thank them, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Have a wonderful small lunch because you got to go to the workshops, but DeVern has 3 announcements.
Okay, all right, very important announcements, very important. Please hold on for just 1 second. One is, we're going to shave 15 minutes off the second workshop, so you've got an hour. Get a sack lunch. Come join us for the workshop. So it's 12:30 to 1:30. 12:30 to 1:30. Workshops will start at 12:30. 1:30 to 2:30. Is that right? Okay, 1:30 to 2:30. 1:30 to 2:30. 2. We've got extra programs. I know some of you lacked those. They will be spread out on the tables where you registered. Go pick them up. They're all there for you. 3, this is very important. There is a conservative news group here. They're called Campus Reform. They are doing woman on the street or person on the street interviews. They are not us. They are not us. I want that to be very clear. We know what man in the street interviews are for. They're to make fun of people. I would suggest, just a suggestion, if you have the chant sheet, you could use that and just stick to that, or just stick to an affirming, positive message. You don't even have to answer their questions. That's just a suggestion. If you want to do it or don't do it. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. The workshops are right now. I screwed that up, didn't I? Sorry. Right now, the workshops, and then we'll set you loose at 1:30. I promise. We'll be short. Run to us. We'll keep you alive in the workshop. Sorry, I did screw that up totally. All right, thank you very much.